I'd like to introduce Maree from Australia, who takes LDN for Hailey Hailey's disease. Thank you for joining me, Maree.
Thanks, Linda. It's my pleasure.
Could you tell me when you first started to notice there was something wrong with your skin?
When I first started to notice issues, did you say?
Yes.
Look, really in my 20s, I'm 47 at the moment. In my 20s, I had lots of what I now know to be outbreaks. However, was always diagnosed as eczema, and a wet type of eczema. So diagnosis for Hailey Hailey happened via biopsy around about 3.5 years ago now. Okay.
So at that time, when you were diagnosed, how bad was your Hailey Hailey's?
Certainly not as bad as what it gets now. It's definitely progressed with age. At that point in time, I had an outbreak under my right arm that had just kept coming and going, but it never actually completely went away. And my doctor was becoming quite confused because antibiotics weren't helping to clear the infection that I was getting. And so she decided that perhaps we needed to do some more investigating. At that point in time, I probably had that particular outbreak for around about 8 months.
Wow. Okay. So your doctor was giving you antibiotics, it wasn't clearing up. And how long after that was it before you heard about LDN?
I actually only heard about LDN, or I started reading about it 12 months ago. Back when I had the biopsy and I was first diagnosed with Hailey Hailey disease, the dermatologist that I was going to at the time prescribed a different lot of antibiotic ointment for me, which had an impact. That worked for a little while because I hadn't ever used that form before, so the infection hadn't built up any kind of resistance to it. So for a little while I did get some relief just with antibiotic ointment. But 12 months or so ago, and over that period of time, from that 3 years onwards, gradually, of course, the secondary infections that we as Hailey Hailey disease sufferers get did build up a resistance to that cream. So gradually I started to become worse again, to the point where 12 months ago I ended up in hospital for 10 days because the secondary infection had become so bad that nothing was working. I was unable to treat it at home, so I had to have intravenous antibiotics to have that treated. That was an extremely worrying time for me because certainly at 47 I have 2 young children as well, and I parent them by myself, so I was having difficulty taking care of my children with the state that my skin was in. So I really started then to research different ways of treating it, and that's when I came across LDN. That's actually when I came across a Facebook group called Hailey Hailey Disease Worldwide Support Group, and they were talking about LDN quite a lot, and I started to read a lot of their posts and then make inquiries of my own on the group, and that's where my LDN journey started, really.
Mm-hmm. And how easy was it to get a prescription in Australia?
Originally, my doctor said to me, "Look, we can't get it." I'm very lucky to have quite a forward-thinking doctor. She's a GP, but she also deals in naturopathic types of treatments as well. So she did some research for me and realised that she could get a compound chemist in Sydney to make it up for me. So I was quite disappointed actually initially with my first appointment with her. She really lets me to a degree, research options because this condition is so rare. No, she had never heard about it. My dermatologist, who first diagnosed it, had only had 3 other people who he had ever treated for Hailey Hailey disease. So she works very closely with me. However, she does allow me to research my own treatments, and then I go to her with the nuts and bolts of it, and she will tell me, whether or not she thinks that it's something that we can do. So she's quite open to me suggesting things to her, and I really didn't have any problem getting the medication at all. The biggest problem in Australia is that it's certainly not registered on any of our pharmaceutical benefits, so it's quite expensive for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest problem I face.
And when you first started, did you notice any introductory side effects?
I fortunately didn't. Others did talk about issues that they'd had with sleep, but I read very carefully all of their posts and all of the different issues that people had with the dosage, and I think, obviously they're all made up very different ways, metabolically as well. So I started off very, very slowly, just at 0.5 of the milligram, and I did that for a week, and then I just went up by 0.5 of a milligram each week, and I didn't have any real side effects at all. No sleep deprivation, no bad dreaming or anything really.
Mm-hmm.
I was quite lucky.
And how long did it take before you noticed improvements in your symptoms?
Linda, I was astounded. It was almost. Actually, no, I took photographs because I now realise that it's really important for me to track how my outbreaks, how they react, and I noticed a definite change in, I think it was 3 days. I had my right underarm was quite badly affected at the time, and I also had an outbreak under my left arm as well, and behind my knees. So I was astounded. Within 3 days I noticed changes. The skin started to, the blisters that we get, which are quite weepy, they started to dry up, and that was just amazing.
Mm-hmm. Well, you say you've been on it a year now. Have you?
No,
sorry.
I actually started. No, sorry. To mislead you, I actually started researching it about 12 months ago after that stint in hospital. Mm-hmm. I didn't actually start taking LDN until early September last year. Okay.
So since September, have you had any more breakouts?
I did have one breakout on my back. Just pre-Christmas. I think that the important thing to remember with Hailey Hailey disease sufferers is that one of the biggest issues that we face is secondary infection because the skin is so weak, really. Mm-hmm. In my instance, and many others that I know, with misdiagnosis over the years, and also really what boils down to misuse of cortisone creams and steroid use. Really, it's skinned our skin, and there are places on my body where my skin is quite thin, and that makes it so much more susceptible. And sometimes even a scratch can turn into a Hailey Hailey outbreak. That's actually what happened in me in this particular instance just before Christmas. I got a scratch on my back, and that's where it all started. And very quickly, I ended up with a bacterial infection. So whilst the LDN was working to keep the Hailey Hailey disease at bay, I then had the extra issue of trying to fight the bacterial infection that I ended up with. So across the back of, I suppose you could say, from one shoulder blade to the other, it was on my upper back that I had this particular outbreak. The interesting thing was, though, Linda, previously I had never been able to clear these outbreaks, and I think I look at it as a layering of the skin. So the initial problem, or the initial layer, is the Hailey Hailey, and then the next layer is the infection. This particular time I got a herpes simplex infection in the outbreak, and then 2 days later it started getting worse again after I was being treated for the herpes infection, and I realised that with a biopsy I had a staph infection in the skin as well. So I was battling 2 separate infections, and then the underlying outbreak was being kept at bay by the LDN. And so this particular outbreak, I was actually able to fight those infections very much on a natural level with things like tea tree, lavender, vinegar, and those sorts of things, rather than antibiotics, which to me is it's almost like a gift, not having to take those oral antibiotics, which have so many other impacts for us, internally as well. So I definitely would say that while LDN kept the Hailey Hailey from getting too bad, once I was able to clear the infection, the skin dried up very, very, very quickly with the LDN.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say to other people who've got Hailey Hailey disease?
It's such a difficult disease to pinpoint, and it's such an individual disease. There doesn't ever seem to be rarely is there any one thing that works for a lot of us. Definitely, for me, I read as much as I can. I try what I can at different times. If I find that something's not working, I just keep trying different things, and I seem to have been able to come up with this recipe for myself of the natural spray that I use in the shower with the tea tree and lavender and vinegar and water mix. I think the most important thing, once you have your Hailey Hailey disease under control, which I do now with LDN, is to keep the bacteria away from your skin, and that's what I'm able to do with the tea tree. What would I say to other Hailey Hailey disease sufferers? As far as LDN is concerned, for me it's been a godsend. This summertime in Australia, which is very much the worst time of year for me as a Hailey Hailey disease sufferer. Yes, I've had this small outbreak on my back this pre-Christmas, but I live on the coast. I'm a beach goer. Previously I would just have to stay away. This year I've been on the beach. I've been in the sun. I've taken my children swimming. I'm a surf lifesaver. I've been able to do my volunteer work as a surf lifesaver, which I haven't been able to do the last couple of years. So LDN's been a lifesaver for me.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much for sharing your experience with us, and maybe next year we can do a follow-up.
Linda, that would be great, and I've really enjoyed speaking to you, and thank you so much for your time and all your